Oscar Piastri has finally broken his silence, confirming internal issues at McLaren, just as his title hopes hang by a thread. A 10-second penalty in Brazil shattered his strategy, triggered the retirement of Leclerc, and allowed Norris to escape in the standings. Piastri is now publicly demanding answers from the FIA and questioning how decisions are being made both on and off the track. We dissect the Brazil incident, reveal Piastri's frustration behind the scenes, and explain how this controversy could reshape the 2025 World Championship. Oscar Piastri has been the quiet storm of the 2025 season. Calculated, focused, precise. A driver who lets his driving do the talking. But in Brazil, that calm exterior cracked. After a chaotic opening lap collision that eliminated Charles Leclerc and triggered a controversial 10-second penalty, Piastri finally said what many had suspected for weeks: there are problems inside McLaren, and they're affecting the title fight. For a driver fighting for his first world championship, that's not just frustration. That's a warning shot. The Brazilian Grand Prix was supposed to be a launchpad. After a dominant start to the season, Piastri had seen his lead eroded by Lando Norris. Still, with 3 races to go, he had everything to fight for. But as the lights went out in São Paulo, chaos erupted. Piastri, Antonelli, and Leclerc found themselves side by side in a tight corner. The result? Contact, carbon fiber, and consequences. Leclerc retired. Antonelli spun. And Piastri, despite not being the only one involved, was the only driver penalized. That penalty changed the course of the race and possibly the season. 10 seconds added to his pit stop destroyed his track position, eliminated any shot at an undercut, and forced him to recover through dirty air and worn tires. Meanwhile, Norris, untouched by drama, extended his championship lead to 24 points. In a season where every point matters, the timing of the FIA's decision was brutal. Instant judgment. No room for discussion. And to Piastri's camp, no fairness. But the Real explosion came after the race. Piastri didn't rant. He didn't curse. He spoke clearly, firmly, and for the first time, admitted something fans had speculated for months: not everything inside McLaren is running smoothly. In his words, there are clear differences emerging, and they're explainable. That's not just vague diplomacy. That's a hint, a suggestion that, behind the scenes, strategic equality might not be as balanced as the public believes. The reaction from fans was immediate. Was Piastri being marginalized in favor of Norris? Was the FIA's penalty too hasty, too severe? Why did the stewards rush to punish only one driver when the footage clearly showed 3 involved? Social media exploded. Analysts began questioning the internal dynamics at McLaren. And suddenly, the conversation wasn't about the race. It was about trust in the FIA, in the team, and in how this title fight is being managed. The opening lap of the Brazilian Grand Prix was always going to be critical. The run into Turn 1 at Interlagos is short, aggressive, and brutally unforgiving. With 3 championship contenders bunched together, risk was inevitable. And yet, it was Oscar Piastri who seized the initiative. Launching from the second row, he braked late on the inside of Kimi Antonelli, a clean, calculated move. What he didn't expect was Antonelli cutting across the apex under braking and Leclerc holding a wide line with full commitment. In a heartbeat, 3 lines converged into one and contact was inevitable. The result was dramatic. Leclerc's Ferrari was launched off the circuit, race over in seconds. Antonelli spun, losing a massive chunk of track position. Piastri? He had light front wing damage but continued. On paper, a typical first-lap racing incident. But within minutes, the stewards issued their ruling: Piastri, 10-second time penalty. The reason? He was deemed predominantly at fault for initiating the collision. Not entirely responsible, but enough to bear the consequences alone. That ruling stunned the paddock. Not just because of its speed handed out within a handful of laps, but because of its inconsistency. Earlier in the year, similar multi-car collisions on opening laps had been dismissed as racing incidents. Why the change in judgment now? Piastri wasn't reckless. He didn't dive bomb from too far. The replay showed a committed move, but one that had merit. The kind of overtake we celebrate when it works. This time, it didn't. But was it really a penalty-worthy offense? From a team perspective, it was catastrophic. The penalty had to be served at his first stop, removing him from the undercut window and burying him in midfield traffic. McLaren's strategy unraveled in real time. While Norris surged ahead in clean air, Piastri was left to rebuild his race from the shadows, forced to manage tires, energy systems, and overheating brakes, all while recovering through turbulent air. It wasn't just a blow to his points tally. It shattered the balance of McLaren's 2-car strategy. Psychologically, it left a scar. Piastri is known for his calm, methodical, almost robotic in high-pressure moments. but even he couldn't hide the frustration. Over team radio, he made it clear, Antonelli moved under braking and didn't leave space. He wasn't pleading. He was stating facts. And for a driver who rarely raises his voice, it carried weight. He felt wronged not just by a racing incident, but by a system that judged too quickly and punished too harshly. And then came the fallout. The penalty didn't just cost him points. It handed Norris the psychological upper hand. With the win in Brazil, Lando now leads the championship by 24 points. More than that, the balance inside McLaren shifted. From two equal title contenders to one leading the charge and one questioning the system and perhaps even his team's internal decisions. For Piastri, the penalty in Brazil wasn't just about a crash. It was a trigger. And now, the gloves are off. When the 10-second penalty came down, McLaren's strategy team was thrown into damage control. Their entire plan for Oscar Piastri, an early undercut to get ahead of Antonelli and undercut Leclerc, was instantly neutralized. With the penalty to be served during his pit stop, McLaren was forced to abandon their primary scenario and pivot to what race engineers refer to as Plan D, an aggressive overcut, tire management through traffic, and a late race push on worn rubber. Not ideal. Not designed to win. Simply to survive. From the cockpit, Piastri's response was clinical. No panic. No defeatism. He immediately began asking for tire data, brake temperatures, and rear slip delta. He adapted his pace, protected his tires, and looked for clear air windows even as Norris built an unchallenged lead up front. This is where Oscar Piastri's real value shines. Even under pressure, even when robbed of strategy, his mental processing speed and engineering feedback remain elite. He's not just fast. He's intelligent. But the differences inside the team were becoming more visible. Norris had a clear run, early clean air, and no in-race disruptions. Meanwhile, Piastri was handed the penalty with no radio defense replayed, no on-board review shown during the race broadcast. Fans noticed. Analysts noticed. And Oscar noticed too. In Formula One, perception matters. And when perception suggests unequal footing between teammates in a title battle, trust begins to erode even if no one says it aloud. On the data sheets, Piastri's pace post-penalty was strong sector 2 times, nearly matching Norris, despite tire disadvantage. He executed multiple clean overtakes into turn 4 and even pulled a stunning double move on lap 26. But it wasn't enough. Traffic, dirty air, and tire degradation compounded his time loss. In the end, he crossed the line in 5th, a result that felt more like a quiet protest than a celebration of recovery. Inside the garage, the mood was split. Piastri's mechanics moved with silent efficiency, no high-fives, no celebrations. On the Norris side, there were smiles, relief, even light-hearted radio chatter. And while McLaren insists both drivers receive equal support, the contrast in emotional energy was impossible to ignore. In a championship fight this close, even the smallest imbalance in tone, in strategy, in body language becomes part of the story. And for Piastri, this story is evolving. The penalty exposed a strategic vulnerability, yes. But more importantly, it raised questions about consistency both from the FIA and from McLaren. Why wasn't there a firmer defense from his side of the pit wall? Why was the response so muted? And if a driver as composed as Piastri starts feeling isolated under pressure, then McLaren may have a bigger problem than just a points deficit. They may be risking a fracture in the very structure of their title challenge. For the first 18 races of the season, Oscar Piastri barely said a word outside the car. He was precise, respectful, and always measured. But Brazil changed something. His post-race comments weren't explosive, but they cut deep. Asked about the incident with Antonelli and Leclerc, he didn't default to team speak or vague explanations. Instead, he calmly questioned the penalty, stated his position clearly, and, most surprisingly, acknowledged there were differences growing inside McLaren. That one sentence was a tectonic shift in tone. What made it remarkable wasn't just what he said, it's how he said it. There was no rage, no finger-pointing. Just a confident driver finally drawing a line. For someone who had spent his entire F1 career avoiding drama, this was his version of slamming a fist on the table. And that restraint made it more powerful. It was the clearest indication yet that the stakes, and the tension, had both reached a new level. The pressure isn't just coming from the outside. Inside McLaren, the Norris-Piastri relationship has always been framed as respectful competition. But in reality, they're two elite drivers chasing the same dream, inside the same machinery, with only one world title on offer. And after Brazil, the balance has shifted. Norris now holds a 24-point lead and is clearly the favorite in terms of team momentum. Every engineer, every strategy call, every second of track time, all of it now carries weight. For Piastri, that creates a new kind of isolation. And yet, rather than retreating, Piastri is now leaning into the pressure. After the race, he personally requested a review with McLaren's internal strategy unit, not to complain, but to understand. Understand the logic of the calls made, the sequence of events, and the reasoning behind the muted response to his penalty. That's the kind of initiative top-tier champions show. It's not about blaming others. It's about ensuring it doesn't happen again. Because in Formula One, information is control. But the broader impact of this turn is psychological. Norris may have won in Brazil, but Piastri came out of the weekend sharper, more alert, and more vocal. That mental reset born from frustration, yes, but also from clarity could define the final stretch of the season. He's no longer racing with the pressure of expectation. He's now racing with a point to prove, not just to the FIA, but to his own garage. And that makes him dangerous.